Philosopher and scientist Blaise Pascal once wrote that all of humanity's problems stem from their inability to sit quietly alone in their room. According to Pascal, the number one obstacle that keeps us from being a society we long to see and from me becoming the person I want to be is my inability to shut up, shut the door, and to shut out all the noise. What's crazy is that he wrote those words in the 17th century, before podcasts and smartphones and Netflix and TikTok and Audible, before we all became hyper-connected at all times in all places. And he's not alone in advocating for building a habit of silence in your life. Gandhi once said, in reference to living harmoniously, the divine radio is always singing if we could only make ourselves listen to it. But it's impossible to listen without silence. Jesus, the central figure of the Christian faith, is recorded to have spent a ton of time in silence and solitude. The Greek word that the authors of the New Testament used for it was the eremos. It referred to this place that was desolate and lonely. In the accounts of Jesus' life, he used that word over 30 times. Before Jesus preached any sermons or healed any people, he went to the eremos for 40 days. After a full day of ministry, he slept, got up early, and went to the eremos. After his cousin John the Baptist was beheaded, Jesus went to the eremos. Right before he chose his first disciples, right before he fed the 5,000, after he and the disciples finished a mission trip around Judea, when his popularity was growing and more people wanted to follow him, before he ever walked on water, he was secluded in solitude alone. Before dueling with the devil in the desert, he was in silence for 40 days. More on that in a second. And before he was arrested and crucified, he went away from his disciples to pray alone. It seems like before or after Jesus did anything of significance, he spent time in silence and solitude. Here's the point that I really want to make. By most estimations, Jesus was one of the most loving, most joyful, peaceful people who exhibited patience and kindness and goodness to most people, even in the midst of an incredibly challenging and busy and chaotic life. The question is, how do you do it? I mean, for all of the apps and videos, podcasts and books that are out there for how to tame these crazy busy times, what if the hack for handling life wasn't something you had to start doing, but it was something you had to stop? There's only one problem. I hate being alone in the silence. My life is filled with two kinds of noise. There's the external and the internal. The external is kind of obvious. It's everything that you take in from outside yourself. It's the podcasts, the TV shows, scrolling social, Spotify, stand-up comedy, the good, the bad, the ugly. It's everything that you take in with your eyes and your ears. And it's indiscriminate. It's not about whether or not what you're listening to or watching, what you're taking in is good or bad. It's not a value judgment at all. That's not the point. The point is the potential that I have to constantly subject myself to an onslaught of external noise, listening to music or watching TV while I do the dishes or when I drive somewhere, while I exercise or play with my kid or get my work done, even when I am falling asleep. I'm addicted to the external noise. And practicing silence starts with silencing everything else. But here's the thing, and maybe this is true for you. The reason I'm addicted to external noise is because it drowns out the internal noise. You know, that voice between your ears, the one that's constantly offering a commentary on absolutely everything, the rude, the thirsty, the angry, or the jealous thoughts about other people, the tape that plays in your head that's either self-destructive or self-aggrandizing. The one that's constantly playing out fantasies and obsessions and worries and ruminations. We often use external noise to drown out that internal noise, to distract myself, entertain myself. It's funny, another word for entertainment is amusement. And that word, amusement, is broken up into two parts, muse and ah. Muse means to think. Ah is not. In other words, amusements are about not thinking. The scary part is that when I consistently drown out the internal noise with amusements or entertainments, even good music or podcasts, I notice that I start to become ignorant to how my internal noise is affecting me, how it's impacting the way I live and love and work and parent and study. I mean, silence can be scary. Sometimes it's easier to just turn up the noise. But something important happens when you silence the external noise of life. It allows you to admit and address what's going on inside, to admit those thoughts and ideas and impulses playing on repeat, and then to address them. And listen, this is something that Jesus actually gets. In the 4th chapter of his account of Jesus' life, Luke tells about this time early on when Jesus wandered around in the wilderness for 40 days. And Luke says he was tempted by the devil. Now, whatever you do or don't think about the devil, don't get hung up on those details because they're not the point. The point is that at the end of those 40 days, Jesus faced 3 trials. The first was about appetite. In particular, it was about food. The devil said, if you are the Son of God, turn this stone into bread. In other words, if you really are who you think you are, shouldn't you have whatever it is that you want to have? Shouldn't you eat whatever you want to eat? Is your internal appetite not screaming at you, I need this? I mean, if I just had a little, then I'd be okay. The second was a trial of achievement. In particular, Jesus saw the kingdoms of the world in all their splendor, and the devil said, if you are who you say you are, don't you deserve to have all this? Shouldn't you have it already? Why haven't you achieved it yet? I could give it to you. And the last was about affirmation. If you really say who you say you are, Jesus, then don't you deserve to live a life without pain? Shouldn't you be able to throw yourself off this cliff and have God rescue you? And each time, Jesus would respond with a simple answer. We don't live by bread alone. Don't worship the devil. Don't test God. And sometimes people say, oh, look at Jesus. He quoted the Bible at the devil in order to overcome those temptations. You see, the secret superpower is to memorize Scripture. Maybe. But I think you could also say that it was spending time in silence that gave Jesus the superpower to tackle life's most difficult trials. I mean, with all of the external noise eliminated, Jesus could admit the internal noise and address it. Address that sometimes what feels like deep longings or needs are simply appetites. Internal noise telling me that if I just had this or a little more of that, then everything would be okay. And the truth is, there's more to life than simply satisfying our cravings. He could admit that at times the idea of being king of your own castle or even a bunch of castles would be amazing, to build something incredible and stand at the top over it all. And then he could address that achievement noise with the truth that nothing is worth losing your soul over. The allure of achievement was conquered in silence. And that final one, so important, that sneaking suspicion that if God really loved me, why on earth would he ever let anything bad happen to me? To admit that internal noise that assumes that God's love for me is affirmed by my current circumstance. And if life's not good, then that must mean God's not good. That if I were truly worthy of love, if I were truly significant, if I actually did matter, then God wouldn't let me suffer. Jesus conquered all that internal noise in silence. Now, wouldn't it be great if I could say to you, now if you just follow Jesus' 10 steps on his wilderness retreat, you too could silence that inner turmoil that you have around you, the uncontrollable appetite, the desperation to achieve something great, and that sneaking suspicion that you're unlovable. We can fix that. And hey, maybe following Jesus would. Maybe it wouldn't. The point, though, is to say, Jesus understands your internal noise. He understands my appetites, my anxiety over achievement, and my fear that I don't actually matter. I mean, Jesus put on flesh and experienced all of it. And then he gave his life sharing God's love and forgiveness until his last breath. I mean, for all the times that I've let my cravings get the better of me or sold my soul to try and get ahead, for the times that I've doubted God's love because of my own pain and suffering, and then had all of those things separate me from others and from God, Jesus gave his life to make it right. He gave his life saying, "You are loved so much, I thought you were worth dying for." All of which is a nice thing to say, but the only reason anyone actually believed him was because 3 days after he died, he rose from the dead. It was like a confirmation for his followers that what he spoke was the truth. And then his last message to those disciples, those students of his, was to invite others to pattern their lives after him. Not as a way to please God or to get something from God or even to achieve some sort of special spiritual status, but as a regular way to be reminded of his love. You see, that's why it's worth it to me to make a habit of being silent. I mean, what if silence could be your superpower? What if shutting out the noise, shutting off the device, or shutting the door could be almost like a surgical tool treating your inner noise? I'm not saying it'll satiate every appetite or eliminate your drive for achievement or even fully supplant your suspicion that you aren't worthy of love. But it will provide an opportunity to admit those things and then apply the love of Jesus to them. To recognize when you're being driven by your desire and then ask, is this something I absolutely need to survive right now, or am I just stress eating? Am I compromising my values and beliefs in order to chase that accolade and grade or achievement? I mean, why am I so ambitious for this? And when it comes to questioning my own personal sense of worth and value, silence can allow me to pause and remember that God loved me so much he thought I was worth dying for. Friends, so many of our problems in life stem from our inability to sit quietly alone in our rooms. And so I want to encourage you to experiment with me. Take some time. Maybe take some time daily if you can, but at least weekly to shut up, shut it all off, shut the door, and face the silence. But do it knowing you are loved. I mean, if Jesus thought he needed this hack in order to handle life, why wouldn't we give it a try, right? And besides, I truly think that the society that we long to see and the person that you want to be, I believe that more love and joy and peace are hanging in the balance. Thanks for watching.